Today we're going to talk about environmental issues in Europe. The first environmental issue we're going to focus on is the nuclear disaster that happened in Chernobyl, Ukraine. The second issue we'll focus on is air pollution that occurs mainly within the United Kingdom. Other areas, of course, have air pollution, but the United Kingdom has especially been affected by this environmental issue. The acid rain in Germany is the third issue which we will explore. Let's first focus on the nuclear disaster in Chernobyl, Ukraine. As you can see, it occurred on April 26, 1986. And if you look at the map, it shows you not only where the Ukraine is located, but the city of Chernobyl is in the northern part of the country. That becomes an issue when we explore this a little bit more based on location. The what is, obviously, it was a nuclear power plant that had reactors that overheated and spilled out radioactive material. One of the things that we use nuclear power for is it's a source of producing cheap energy without causing normally a lot of air pollution. The debate continues still whether it is worth having a nuclear power plant versus other energy sources that can cause pollution in other areas. The other advantage, obviously, of using nuclear power is it doesn't use up the Earth's supply of fossil fuels, which coal, oil, some of those sources do. This is a great way to have energy, but we're going to look at one of the downsides because of this disaster. What did Chernobyl look like before and after? You can see from these pictures, the before, it's a nuclear facility, and the after, basically its entire structure was melted down after the accident. Here's the big problem, though. Not only was it a disaster to begin with, but it became a much bigger problem due to the Soviet Union's covering this event up. Because they did not recognize or alert nearby towns and countries, the radioactive material floated from one country to another and was detected as far north as Sweden. And basically, a lot of people were affected that didn't necessarily need to be had they not covered it up. Let's talk about the damage done. About 1/10 of their land and about 1 million people were exposed to high levels of radiation. Not only does this cause sickness, lung disease, but it also causes high rates of cancer, which have been definitely reported based on this event. Part of the problem is that this radioactive material didn't just affect the ground and water supply, it definitely affected and blew up into the atmosphere. And with winds, that radioactive material was carried to other bordering countries, and it spread the contamination, and people didn't know that they were being exposed to it until days later, and even weeks later. The water became unsafe, livestock, chicken and cows, which basically affected milk supplies. Fish became contaminated, so you couldn't eat the fish. Obviously, you couldn't drink the water. Pine forest turned brown and died, and the area around the nuclear power station was evacuated, but the exclusion zone was a 30-mile circumference around. This shows you a picture of Ukraine, and you can see the border. This is the northern border of Ukraine. Chernobyl, again, is a city located in the northern part. The disadvantage of that is when that radioactive explosion occurred, that those toxins and that radioactive material was carried to Belarus, to Russia, and Poland as well. But the big areas that were affected was right here. Let's talk a little bit about the cleanup. Not only did they have a cleanup of the facility, but they basically had to create a concrete dome over the facility to contain that contamination. They decommissioned a plant where anything that was built similar with a similar engineering and construction of Chernobyl was decommissioned and shut down, or they were upgraded to prevent this type of nuclear disaster in the future. Movable objects near the plant had to be buried. Trucks, cars, even topsoil was contaminated, so you couldn't plant anything because of the radioactive material that was in the ground. Some 60,000 buildings had to be washed with special chemicals, and even roofs had to be replaced. They had this special solution that was sprayed throughout the danger zone, and it helped prevent dust from blowing back up and continuing to spread the contamination. Nearby trees had absorbed the radiation. They all had to be cut down and buried. They couldn't burn them, obviously, because that would also create more smoke, which would carry on the pollution. So they had to bury those in concrete pits. Let's talk a little bit about the impact to the environment. Radiation still lingers today, causing a number of people that were not only exposed back then, but that were not notified within several days of the event. They had a number of reported illnesses, cancer, lung disease, etc. Bordering countries, Russia, Belarus, Poland, were greatly affected, and again, they detected a radiation all the way up into the northern country of Sweden. Millions of acres of farmland have been poisoned with the radiation. The bottom line is that it affected the food source, and it caused food shortages, which then those countries had to import. They couldn't farm on that land or that topsoil that had become contaminated, and they needed to then import their food, which was a major cost for those countries. These show you some pictures of the before, actually the after. Acid rain in Germany. Let's focus on the second environmental issue, which is acid rain. Again, you can have acid rain in other parts of Europe, but for the most part it has been concentrated in Germany. And you can see here from your map, this is where Germany is located. Acid rain. This shows you some areas of the world that are affected by acid rain. You see North America and the coast. Not only are we affected here in Georgia, but all the way up the eastern coastline. Why do you think that might be? You also see here in Europe these areas, and I'll answer that question in a second. It has to do with industrial areas. These areas in the world tend to be more developed. They have more urban areas, which are areas that contain cities, and they have more factories, and that is the biggest cause of acid rain. And you can see here from the picture, you can see some factories in one of the more developed and urban areas. One of the effects of acid rain is shown in this picture. Do you see the before and the after? Notice that while this is made from stone, the stone over time, because of the acid rain and the pollution and acidic toxins that are located in the water deposits, settle here on the statue and start to eat away. And you see the erosion of the stone, and you see the lack of detail here compared to here. Acid rain in Germany. Let's look at some of the effects. In rain, it occurs in rain, snow, sleet, and other wet types of precipitation. It's polluted acids such as sulfuric acid and nitric acid. And those are the two main chemicals contained in acid rain. It's mainly a cause of coal, gas, and oil, which are produced by factories in urban areas, cars, and power plants. It harms the environment in large areas. And again, we just saw a picture prior to the screen on the type of damage it can do to statues and buildings and bridges, and over time it starts to erode those structures. Secondly, it can kill an entire fish population in lakes because of the amount, and depends on the amount of acid contained in those chemicals up here, sulfuric acid and nitric acid contained in the acid rain. And finally, it can harm forests and soil. And that's been a big problem in Germany because a lot of their forests have been affected by acid rain. And basically what happens is it eats and erodes the waxy substance on the leaves, and then those chemicals go into the plant and are absorbed by the plant and prevent the plant from processing and having photosynthesis, which kills the plant. And again, here's a diagram of shows you what happens. Those sulfuric dioxide and nitrogen oxides are released into the atmosphere. Those gases are carried and then combine with precipitation, and then it comes down in the form of acid rain. What are some of the ways that we can combat this problem? It mainly occurs in urban environments and cities rather than rural areas, which rural areas are more countrysides and in less populated areas. They tend not to have many factories, whereas cities here tend to have those factories, a lot of concentrated population, which is cars and power plants. The key to managing the problem is decreasing the amount of vehicles on the road, and there's a number of different solutions such as carpooling and public transportation that can transport people without having so many individual cars per person. And the additional big issue is industrial factories and the emissions that those factories cause. Some developed devices that help, and they are contained within the factories that are regulated, but they help remove those harmful particles from smokestacks. They're basically function like filters and traps and prevent those gases from entering into the air. And that basically, they also have a second device that can, in essence, scrub or wash out the particles with chemical sprays. Air pollution in the United Kingdom. Smog is a form of air pollution, and it's caused by sunlight acting on the gases. It's mainly, the gases come into the air mainly from the vehicles or cars that you drive and the factories that produce the goods that we use. They have their emissions cause this type of air pollution. The smog that happened in London in 1952 occurred basically when water vapor mixed with all the smoke particles they had. During that time, they had a lot of coal factories, and that was a big source of energy. So those coal factories would create almost like fires, and what happened is it became, instead of a fog, it was a smog. It looks like fog, but it wasn't a fog that would clear. It was a smog. It was basically air pollution that occurred. The UK's main source of natural resources, which the country is blessed with a lot of resources. The disadvantage is, though, that when they were processing these, they have a lot of pollution. Oil is a big natural resource, natural gas and coal. And that's how those countries, or that country, has their energy source, but the downside is it's caused a lot of air pollution for them. And again, you see from the picture, is it fog or smog? You see pictures of London, and it's usually pictured with an overcast, but they've also had a big issue with smog. And the question is it more fog or smog? The environmental effects of smog are the following. People can get a lot of lung disease, such as asthma and pneumonia. A lot of kids and the elderly especially are affected with this type of breathing disorder, mainly because children, their lungs aren't developed, and the elderly, their lungs are having less diminished capacity. Their lungs aren't functioning like a healthy adult would. It contaminates water, and it's also harmful to animals, much like it is for humans. It can destroy plant life as well, and we discussed that when we talked about acid rain. It causes building material to deteriorate faster than usual, and again, we saw that with the statue of acid rain. But air pollution, to the same extent, can do some of the same type of damage. if you look and go to this YouTube video, it will show you a little documentary that talks a little bit about air pollution.